Thanks for coming, everybody. It's a great showing.
Here, I'll hold it for you.
I hate this part. I just want to introduce Alex Tardy. It was my pleasure to actually have him come up here. I'm excited to have him here. He came all the way from San Diego. He is the Awarding Coordination Meteorologist Manager. He's also the Emergency Preparedness and Partner Collaboration Person. He's also Education and Outreach Coordinator. And he's also Media and Public Information Officer. And we're very, very happy to have him. So without further ado, Alex, where are you?
And you will have to try to get it out.
Thank you, Joanne and everyone. This is amazing. Do we have a head count? 200? Let me know. I took photos, so this is great that everyone come out here. Can everyone hear me in the way back? All right, because I can talk louder if I need to. So what I'm going to talk about here is what you've been hearing about in the news and on the media and probably even from Joanne. But first of all, what is my position? Where do I work? So I work for National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, National Weather Service, which is located in Rancho Bernardo. If you're ever in the area, stop by. We can give you a tour of our facility. We're a 24/7 operation, not on call. We are on call, but 24/7 staff, always there, always 2 meteorologists. Why? Because of places like Silverado Canyon. We activate the emergency alert system. The thing that scrolls across the TV, goes on the radio, interrupts your favorite program. We do that basically by a push of a couple buttons. So someone has to be there always for dam breaks, flash flooding, tsunamis, so forth. When we're not doing that, we're issuing regular forecasts. Some of you might get information from Joanne. We're working with Office of Emergency Services. We're providing them with expected rainfall amounts, when it's going to rain, how hard it's going to rain, when it's going to stop, that type of thing. Directly with them, whether it be 2 o'clock in the morning, Vicki might call us, or normal business hours. When we're not doing that, we're providing climate information, like in my presentation here. We're helping communities, we're helping media, we're helping emergency managers better be educated, better be able to explain it to someone else, better to be able to make a decision. And that's all part of Weather Ready Nation. And actually, everyone in here can be part of Weather Ready Nation as well. You can just Google it and see more information about it. I have lots of handouts, probably not enough. I have handouts on Weather Ready Nation, flooding, the science of flooding, El Nino, the science of El Nino, and so forth. So hopefully you're able to grab some of the handouts and take with you so you don't have to take notes. There's also links and other pieces of information. What is El Nino? El Nino is not a rainstorm. It's not a hurricane. It's really none of that. All it is ocean temperatures way out near the equator, way out near the equator. So how does that impact our weather? Well, what happens is it's actually a normal phenomenon. It's not global warming. It's something normal. El Nino develops. When it does develop, it affects our jet stream. What's our jet stream? Besides where our pilots fly, that's where our storms come in on. It's basically a street or a train of storms. El Nino allows it to come down from Oregon, Washington, where it normally likes to camp out during the average winter, and actually be focused on Southern California. So we'll talk about that in detail. And I think we'll have time for questions too at the end. So first of all, what's been going on with the summer? I don't know if you've noticed, but it's rained, it's been warm, it's been humid, it's been muggy, and there's things going on that we need to talk about before we jump into El Nino. Believe it or not, before South Carolina joined us just the other day, Southwest California has been the most unusual weather in the country. We don't typically see much rain in the summer, not even in the Santa Ana Mountains here. Typically it's out in the deserts and maybe in the San Bernardino Mountains where we see monsoon thunderstorms. Our region has been inundated with rain, and it's not even winter yet. Now, at the same time we've been wet, we've also been warm, and that's been really a broken record. The past 2 years, our region, and I'll show you some maps here, some charts, and the state of California has been the warmest it's ever been since records began about 150 years ago. This past summer, some of the humidity levels are not what we normally see here in coastal California. Can we blame it on El Nino? In this case, we can't, but we can blame it on what's so-called the blob. The blob is an unusual area of warm water separate from El Nino, completely separate from El Nino. Sorry if I'm blocking the folks in the front. Maybe I can stand more to the side. What is causing the blob? Where did it come from? It's actually relatively simple, even though it's unusual. The past 3 years, the reason why we haven't had any storms across the California coast is because we've basically had a large rock in the middle of the river. The river is our jet stream. And so that's prevented any storms, very few, storms from making it into anywhere in California, especially Southern California. Because of that lack of storminess, the ocean temperatures have continued to warm away from El Nino, separate. Those ocean temperatures are usually, they're used to wind, they're used to waves, they're used to currents, upwelling. None of those processes could work. So what's basically resulted from these lack of storms, or the ridge of high pressure blocking our storm track, is blob 1 and blob 2. Great scientific word. I didn't come up with it, but everyone understands it, so that's good. The El Nino area is separate. That has just formed over the past couple months, really since April. On the right-hand side is what it normally looks like when we enter into a pretty healthy El Nino like we're doing now. You can see clearly the two are different. So not only are we dealing with El Nino, but we're also dealing with this warm blob. And what has this blob already done? Well, it's produced a lot of hurricanes, and believe it or not, some of that moisture has directly come up to us. Most recently, September 15th. That was moisture directly. It wasn't remnants really of a hurricane. We didn't have wind, we didn't have thunderstorms, but it was direct moisture that came up from the tropics and produced unusually heavy rain everywhere on September 15th. Okay, on this pretty color here, we like to use colors. And so like when you're a meteorologist, you can't be colorblind, otherwise you're in a lot of trouble. But we do have a lot of pretty maps, as you would see like in our office. And here's one map. I want to focus mostly on the right-hand side. So what I did is I looked at what's going on over the summer. We averaged the whole summer, day, night, week, month, all together. And clearly there's a signal coming out from the ocean over land that in the upper right, we've been unusually warm. The yellow is not off the scale, but it's pretty high in the scale. The blue, or the purple, that is an indication of unusually wet, meaning humidity, mugginess, temperature on the right. So over the past couple of years, if it's been bad enough, we've been dealing with drought. We've been dealing with very warm, excessively warm temperatures. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But now this year, we've been dealing with, and a little bit last year too, excessive humidity. And it's really driven up comfort levels, made it more difficult to sleep, more AC bills, so forth. Can we blame it on the monsoon? The monsoon's another one of those fancy words like El Nino or something. But actually the monsoon, as shown in the purple, has been basically pointed east of us. So we can't really blame it on the monsoon. But we definitely see that its origins are coming directly from the blob, or the unusual warm Pacific Ocean temperatures, which are from the drought, or the lack of storms. So what does this mean for us? So we enter into this year after 2 consecutive years of unusually dry conditions, basically lack of storms, for better words. Because of El Nino forming, we're now seeing a jet stream develop, as shown here, and it's already developing near Hawaii and moving across the Central America into Atlantic. It is a direct result in why the Atlantic, up until Joaquin, which basically was not a player, has not had really any hurricanes. So while the Pacific is starting to boil, so to speak, with hurricanes, with El Nino forming, we got the winter coming up, the Atlantic is the complete opposite. And that tends to happen a lot with weather. I know a lot of you are thinking, maybe some of you are thinking, the polar vortex, Alex. That was around. How come we don't talk about the polar vortex and we keep saying everything's so warm? Well, we can talk about the polar vortex if we want. It's a tiny anomaly on a large planet. The bigger anomaly is the warmth. So in September of this past year, if it wasn't bad enough that March was record-breaking, March was warmer than any April we had. Let me repeat that. March was warmer than any April we've had. We've been seeing continued periods of warmth month after month, year after year. Now, this past month, the only year that was warmer was 1984, not too far ago. Let's look back the past 24 months for the whole state of California. There isn't a 2-year period that's warmer for the state of California. So if it seems bad in Southern California, it's been bad in Northern California, it's been bad in the deserts, it's been bad on the coast in terms of warmth. How about 48 months? We have not seen a time, in fact, in the past 36 months, the only month, so it's kept us quite busy, a lot of things to talk about. The only thing that was the month of May was the only month that we actually were normal, let alone not even below normal. When you look at the coast of California, focus on the coast, our free air conditioner is called the Pacific Ocean. That's why we live here. That's why our climate is typically quite moderate, other than when we have some violent Santa Anas or ferocious floods. The temperatures on the coast are just as warm as they've been everywhere across the state. Record-breaking, not seen before. Where do the numbers come from? They come from all different weather stations. They come from satellite. They come from anything that's available. Anything that's available, all averaged together, smoothed out, divided by 2, and it still shows up as much warmer. Now, most of you think of drought as precipitation. I know I used to. Temperature is a very important part of it. In California right now, and you'll see why it's important to talk about the drought before we get too much into El Nino, we're missing 27 inches of rain. That's 2 feet of rain. Deserts, mountains, coast, areas that never rain, areas that rain seems like all the time. All averaged together over 2 feet. There's no other period in record where 4 years has been that dry. We thought 1976-77 was the benchmark for drought, and we thought it was the benchmark for snowpack. No climatologist would tell you, or meteorologist, would tell you that this past year, that the snowpack in the Sierra Nevada would be a fraction of what it was in 76, 77, or even the year before. So we went from 25% of normal snowpack on April 1st in 1976, 77. Last year was 5%. So what are we missing? Well, over the past 4 years, we're missing basically 1 to 2 seasons. So you know how we have bad weeks, we have bad months, we all do, whatever it might be, sports, work, life. With the drought, we've had 1 to 2 seasons out of 4 missed. Didn't occur. I'll show you some numbers that are a little bit staggering. Santa Ana Fire Station, thanks to Santa Ana Fire Station, if anyone's here, has incredible records. If anyone in this room wants to sign up to take weather observations every day, same time for the rest of their life, leave me a little note. You're probably going to come up with some excuse, and you're going to be AWOL once in a while. But when it comes to looking back at what really happened and is something different, is there a trend, we need that data. Well, we got it in Santa Ana, thankfully. They've received 32 inches of rain in the past 4 years. 32. Sounds like a pretty big number, especially for Southern California. Their deficit is 32. So they've received what they're missing out of 4 years. In order for them to get back to square one, just get back to normal rainfall, you know, for groundwater, for everything, for vegetation, they're missing 46 inches of rain. The odds of that happening in any given year, historically, zip. And we don't usually say zip, 0, or 100%, right? Huge numbers. Okay, shifting gears. So is this what it's going to look like come this winter? And that's what we're going to talk about now. and how El Nino means rain, but doesn't mean rain, and why it's going to get quite complicated statewide and quite confusing, and you'll see why. Maybe I can play this. Look familiar?
Yeah. I was gonna say, I've seen that.
So here's the good news. That's right down the road. By the way, Joanne gave me a great tour of at least 4 of the canyons. So here's the good news. That was in December 2010. Anyone want to make a bet if that was an El Nino year or not? No? I hear a lot of no's over here and echoed over here as no. Who said yes? A couple people said yes. It was not an El Nino year. And in fact, it was opposite. It wasn't even like neutral. It was La Nina. Complete opposite. Cold Pacific Ocean. Very cold Pacific Ocean. We'll get back to that, why that's important. Okay, so here's what we've seen last winter, even though last winter was pretty much a dud. We had, what, 4 storms? You could add them up. Most of them were in December. This one was in early March. What's going on in the Pacific Ocean? So this map here shows satellite and buoy data. It's departure from normal. So focus on the blue. Oh, wait, there's no blue. Focus on the green. There's no green. Focus on the orange and the reds. Those are all above normal sea surface temperatures over a 30-plus year average. So not 1 year compared to 1 year, but a long-term average. The El Nino area, as of October 1st, very hot. Think of it like a boiling plate. Now, the arrows pointed to another area, which is the so-called blob, and then there's another blob or two to the north. That is what's been bringing our warm temperatures, our high humidity that we already talked about. But I think now we probably need to focus more on El Nino and then how El Nino and the blob will or will not work together. Okay, so what is El Nino? Just quick 101 meteorology class. So how in the world can warm temperatures down near the equator affect the weather here at Silverado Canyon? No way. Well, most of the energy in the globe comes from the oceans. So almost entirely all the weather is driven by the oceans. The land modifies it just a little bit, meaning the continent, the whole United States. What happens with El Nino is it's not that it's creating hurricanes. We're talking about winter now, not hurricane season. All that warm water builds up in the Western Pacific, and it's very normal. The way weather works is it's a way to balance things out. So when things get too warm, too cold, you get weather. When things get too high pressure, too low pressure, you get weather, like Santa Ana wind. All it is a balancing act. So when something's out of balance, something's getting too hot, too much sun, not enough sun, change the sun angle. To balance it out, weather's created. So with El Nino, you have warm water in the Western Pacific that's sitting there for a long time. That water literally forms thunderstorms. Thunderstorms continue to form. It gets to a cycle almost like where a bucket's filling up and then it spills over. When it spills over, it goes across the equator, shuts off our trade winds. Remember the trade winds? Wasn't that Tom Hanks that was using those because they're so predictable? Shuts off the trade winds. That shuts off your upwelling. That prevents any cool water to come replace the warm water that's in the Western Pacific. So literally you're taking water from the Western Pacific, moving it all the way to the Eastern Pacific. And of course it's all relative, right? The water's naturally warmer in the Western, a little cooler in the Eastern. You're making it unusually warm in a completely different spot along the equator in thousands of square miles, a huge area. What that ends up doing is when we get our normal jet stream, because believe it or not, we don't need El Nino for storms, but when we get our normal jet stream drop down in the middle of the winter, the two contrasts. In other words, the two feed off of each other, and that brings the jet stream basically from Oregon, Washington down to Southern California. Not every day, but for a prolonged period of the winter, much more than we normally see. So that's how El Nino works. Problem is, a lot of the El Ninos are different. They're apples and oranges. The most recent El Nino that probably sticks to your mind if you've lived here for a while is 97, 98. In terms of being strong and in terms of delivering, meaning having a big impact. It's no good if it's strong and it doesn't do anything. What do I mean by that? Well, in 82, 83, 97, 98, we had two big ones, and they delivered statewide. Those are the ones the media grab a hold of, because those are big. Sorry. You got the best seat in the house. Turned out to be the worst. Poor guy. I'll send you some extra emails and photos and things like that, some sneak preview stuff. How about that? So the point on this slide is that multiple El Niños have resulted in completely different results. Some cases very dry for Northern California. In other cases, completely wet. Example, 06, 07 was an El Nino, our last significant drought. 91, 92, one of our most historic droughts that started in the late 80s was an El Nino. And they both were basically duds. For those of you in the room, and I bet there's a few of you, who really like the raw numbers instead of the pretty charts, I got it here for you. So 72, 73, anyone remember that year? That was actually a strong El Nino, and it basically came out to normal. So it all came out in a wash, normal conditions. Blue means normal for rainfall. 82, 83, that was the first time we figured out, wow, we got something going on in the Pacific that seems to work, at least that year. 97, 98, another wow. But in between all those years, we've had a lot of weaker El Niños. I guess they didn't qualify as Godzilla. Weaker El Niños, and they've resulted in anything from very little rain to way too much rain. So obviously there's other things going on. And that's why I showed you the December 2010. We'll briefly talk about that. So here's a little recap so far. So in order to stop talking about the drought, I know you guys are tired of talking about the drought, everyone is. We want the water back. Too much of a good thing. We'll need the state to have 150% of normal precipitation. Likely not to happen. Last time we saw that happen, ironically, was 77, 78, following what we thought was our worst drought ever. We need snowpack. We need snowpack, and I'll explain to you a little bit more about that. Here's the good news. Well, there's the bad news. Variable results from El Nino. Good news, kind of. Moderate to strong El Nino, especially strong, has a very good correlation with Southern California. So what has basically been applied for the whole state, because it makes it more simple, really only applies to our backyard, here. So that's good and bad. Okay, over the past 2 years, we've basically had a jet stream in white. That's where the airplanes fly, flight level. That's what drives all our storms. We've had no storm track. It's been there, but it's been completely avoiding us, going well to the north. And that's an average. Last time we saw something that bad, yeah, you guessed it, 76, 77. The whole winter looked like that. On the right is what we normally see with strong El Niños. You can see the same jet stream, the same storms, but they're shifted south and they take a direct hit on Southern California. Direct hit on Southern California. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, I heard on the news that the warm water in the Pacific made the ridge of high pressure, which blocked all our storms. Close. Other way around. So the ridge of high pressure, which shows up here as the bright orange and reds, extremely unusual over the course of a 2-year period. Usually the atmosphere will reset. Usually it resets like this time of the year. That's why we call it the water year. It never reset. Cold air stayed over the northeast. This warm blob in jet stream level stayed over us. Now in El Nino, here's some good news. It's the complete opposite as you would expect, but it also has relatively much cooler air, which is good for snowpack. And it focused the jet stream very far south. Notice the other bubble of warm air that comes up from the tropics that hasn't been around lately. That is a direct reflection of El Nino, heating the atmosphere, and then you can see the two visually collide. And that's what creates your jet stream, which drives your storms. Okay, so on the left-hand side is before El Nino developed, so the past 2 years. You can see the main blob really shows up. That's the original blob that came out from NASA. On the right-hand side is what a strong El Nino historically looks like 97, 98, 82, 83, 72, 73. And you can see it's quite different. Typically, El Nino is the only beast out there, kind of a one-man show. You got to overlay that with this to get the image I showed you in the beginning of the presentation. Okay, so then why do we say that El Nino is so wet? Well, for Southern California, when you look at all El Ninos, we're one of the bluest locations, which means we're not just normal, we're much above normal. So very wet. On the right-hand side, though, when you pull out those slam dunk years, like 82, 83, 97, 98, the ones that are in your textbooks, when you pull those years out, it stays blue in Southern California, but look what happens in Northern California. It turns red. It's not even normal. So without those big El Ninos, the two that we've had, maybe 2.5, Northern California ends up being very dry. What does that mean for us? Potential, yes, water. Potential continuation of an already historic drought. And we already know what's going on in the Pacific Northwest, and that's almost a sure thing that the drought will worsen up there as well. Okay, here's a caveat though. If you remember this, then you get extra credit. 1965, and I heard some people talking about 1969 too, which was a weak El Nino. 1965 was a strong El Nino going into fall, like October here. If you were a meteorologist, you'd make big money. November was very wet. December, very wet. Then the El Nino waters, the warm temperatures, rapidly dissipated along the equator. The jet stream responded by retreating. Not only did Northern California end up dry, it was near record-breaking dry, all from a strong El Nino. Not what you'd hear on your local news. So our local Scripps at a University of California, they took everything I did and they just put it into one slide and summed it up. So the left-hand side shows the blue. That is the correlation rain and El Nino. So that's kind of where the El Nino as rain comes from. So if you live in the blue area, like us, pretty good correlation. Now in the middle, now here's why I showed you the 2010. In the middle is the correlation to the biggest storms, 69, 93, 80, correlation to the biggest storms. You can see some holes develop in some of the mountains of Southern California, and then especially the Sierra Nevada remains white. So what that is telling us is that for the big storms, the top 5%, the 100-year storms, that type of thing, there is no correlation in many parts of Southern California, especially some of our key water areas. They are unrelated to El Nino. And then on the right-hand side is the remaining storms, which again points to our region as dark blue, meaning that we get wet storms from El Nino, and we get wet storms from non-El Nino, like December 2010. Okay, here are the 2 years that we always talk about, 97, 98, 82, 83. You could almost take them like a puzzle and pull them out. Those are the 2 textbook years. Those are the years we kind of hope for, especially since we're in a drought, but we have to be careful what we wish for with too much. Those years were so wet that they're almost off the chart in terms of compared to, so if you see dark blue, that means there's only a couple more years that were wetter. Only a couple more years that were wet. Years that were wetter, not individual storms. December 2010 was 7 days of storminess, and it ended up being 50% of our precipitation that year from 1 week. We'll talk about those briefly a little bit more to make sure you understand where I'm coming from. Okay, in strong El Ninos, this is typically what happens. We start feeling, the most recent storm, I probably can't give credit to El Nino on that, but we can give some credit to the blob and the unusual amounts of humidity and moisture that's been around. But typically, El Nino starts showing itself in terms of the atmosphere in October, Northern California. Then it spreads south in November. Remember 65, it did that, worked out perfect. Then December, it stays here, a little retreat to the north. Then look what happens in January, February, and March. And this is key. This is what El Nino is all about. A prolonged, persistent and long duration, not storm, but winter. So as soon as you think you're done, you get another storm. As soon as it seems like, okay, that's enough, you get another storm. And that's primarily for Southern California. And it shows up very well in past strong El Niños. Notice that February and March, it really gets dark blue statewide. And what that means is that the cumulative impact, we start off the year, things are okay, not much movement in the earth, gets wetter, gets a little wetter, we get a little break, a long winter. So not only do we have to deal with many storms, we have to deal with a long winter in terms of duration. Now the key is, with any El Nino year, the storms are not bigger. They're not faster, they're not stronger, but you get many more. So the past couple years, we've got like 4 or 5, handful. We should get 10, 12 on an average year. In El Nino, you get 20 to 30 storms. Imagine having those all kind of pile up, like shown here, January, February, March. Then, your worst case scenario, which can't be predicted more than 7 to 10 days, that's why Joanne's emails are very important, can't predict more than 7 to 10 days, is your atmospheric river, your Pineapple Express, your big storms like December 2010. So the wild card this year is, will we have a big storm, meaning like a 1 in 20, a 1 in 30, or will we just have a whole bunch of 1 to 2 years type storms, all piled on one after the other? Pick your battle, right? Both are going to bring significant impact if they occur. The worst case scenario would be that one big week of storms on top of saturated, wet conditions. The state of California has done some research. A lot of the historical major droughts have ended with deluge. 77, 78 was a great example, one of the wettest years on record, and it was once our worst drought the year before. Okay, so how strong is El Nino? So El Nino is not 95%. I know it says that on our website. It's not 95% there. It's 100% there. And it's been there for a couple months. And it's now approaching historical levels in terms of how warm the water is. Underneath El Nino, there's also a reservoir of warm water. Why is that good? Because that means that it's likely not to fade. It's likely to continue all the way through at least the first half of the winter. And that's what's key. Having the ocean and the atmosphere communicate together to really excite the jet stream and keep the storm track focused over us. Reservoir of warm water deep down in the ocean. It hasn't been around very long. Basically April, May, you probably can't see the months. The center is April, May. The far right is September. We continue to see it strengthen in that area along the equator, and it's now at levels never seen before except for 97, 98. And remember, we've already seen drought, temperature, humidity, things like that at levels not seen before. And El Nino is doing the same thing. We have computer models that run, they take a couple weeks to run. They basically simulate the globe out to 12 months, mostly ocean temperatures. And then we correlate that with the atmosphere. They're from France, NASA, Canada, UK, Scripps and La Jolla, multiple models, United States models. And the consensus consistently is pointed to a record-breaking El Nino in terms of the strength at about 2.5. A scale of 0 to 3, 3 is off the chart, 0 is neutral, 2 is a healthy El Nino, and we're already above that. So the expectations are, as we go into the winter, that this corridor of storms, the jet stream, is going to develop, eventually fall southward, starting November, and then get locked over us for the latter half of the winter. Our Januaries over the past 5 years have been duds. The last strong January we had with storminess, that one was an El Nino. That was January 2010. That's the last January we had significant storminess, flooding, and impact. Good news is that this should finally be a winter where we can stop talking about record-breaking temperatures, above normal, low temperatures, high temperatures, everything average temperature. But if you live in the Pacific Northwest, could be in for a long haul, considering how bad it's already been. Doesn't mean they won't get rain. They'll just fall very short and be much warmer than normal, which is what we've been doing the past, 4 years, and why we're in the drought we're in. Here's a zoomed up version on Southern California. So remember I showed you in the first slide that our summer was the most anomalous? Okay, and we think that's largely attributed to the blob, or the blobs, the Pacific warm temperatures, not necessarily El Nino, but for the winter, we're going to give El Nino full credit, and we're expecting our region to be the most impacted. Not Northern California, not Central California. They will get storms, but our region will be in the zone of those frequent storminess where we're basically, wanting a break. Here's a quick summary. So El Nino is already here. It's here to stay. It's expected to remain strong. We officially can't call it strong until we have about 3 months average. You can't take a selfie of El Nino and just call it a day. It has to be multiple months and then averaged together, just the way you do it in climatology to make it fair and not statistically biased either way. The good news about El Nino is that we do get frequent storms. Bad news if you live in a low-lying area, but the snowpack should be significant as well, especially the southern Sierra, not the entire Sierra though. And of course, most of the water in California comes from the northern Sierra Nevada, like Lake Oroville, Lake Shasta, and big portion of the Colorado River. El Nino does not guarantee above normal precipitation. You saw the chart where it's all over the place, different years, and especially for Northern California. So likely we will be talking about continued drought, which is going to make no sense, continued drought while we're dealing with excessive, above normal, and frequent rainfall here in Southern California, while drought is still the big picture in the background. The deficits for the drought are huge, so we don't expect to make up, what was that number, 47 inches or something? We don't expect to make up that number, and hopefully we don't get close to making up that number, because we are not able to handle that type of rainfall anywhere really in Southern California, unless you're in maybe Lytle Creek, and even there. And not even there. So, especially if it comes in a relatively short period of time. So here are some of the impacts and actions that we can do. You guys are already doing it. Cleaning out brush, debris. We are not used to rain. We haven't seen rain for a long time. Unless you're into weather or you live literally in a creek, which some of you do, you're typically not focused on rain. And when it's been 4 years, almost 5 years now, since any significant flooding, other than a storm here and there, it's out of mind. So if we get what's expected to occur, there's going to be a lot of earth movement, a lot of saturation, and a lot of flowing things coming down in different directions, including water. Someone explained to me very good today about cubic feet per second. So when some of these creeks get 600 CFS from a flash flood or a heavy rain event, think of that as 600 basketballs coming down, the force. I can kind of envision that. That's a lot of basketballs. Powerful, very powerful. There is a website. Some of you in these areas, it's probably very obvious. Other places, not so obvious, like if you're in a floodplain where it fans out. There's a great website where FEMA, Department of Water Resources, and local agencies have collaborated, and they show, are you in a 100-year, 200, 500, that type of year floodplain. And you can literally map it out like on a Google map and see your area. Having the fire scar, a whole nother issue, as you've all already learned with the minor events that we've had. There's big concern for Silverado and for the lake fire, both of those areas. They're areas that burned hard, steep terrain, and haven't, to this date, really been tested. And really, we've tested none of our mountain slopes very much, except for last December, and we saw some of the mudslides that occurred then. I encourage you to visit that if you're curious to make sure, or download the app on your web page. Our website is weather.gov San Diego. That's good for monitoring real-time weather. If you want to know, okay, is there a storm coming Friday, Sunday? Is it a big one? Is it a little one? You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. That's our office. I got all my information, a large part of it, from the Climate Prediction Center, which is out of Washington, D.C., part of NOAA. If you like to monitor rain gauges and things like that, you can go directly to our webpage. All you got to remember is weather.gov. Click on observations, click on satellite, click on radar, click on forecasts, that type of thing. You can get rainfall amounts, specific numbers. You can get pretty maps with lots of colors or whatever you might need. Or you can get the dumbed down version that just shows, here comes a storm, big large arrow, that type of thing. We actually do that sometimes. Whatever works. A lot of variety in what people need. I think now we'll, how are we going to do the questions? Where's
We
Joe?
have, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have cards. Those of you, if you would write down your questions. Here, let me have this for a second.
Okay.
I'd like you to pass in those cards if you have questions. Given the size of this group, I think it's the only way to moderate it. So we got a question here. Are the storms more rain at once or more storms but average amounts for each storm?
Did everyone hear the question? Are the storms more at once or average amount but just more storms? More of the latter. More of the latter. So we're not creating necessarily stronger storms, but here's the caveat on that. That's a great question. The warm blob that I talked about, we have already seen last December and even this past weekend. You'd have to be watching the radar 24/7 to see it. We've already seen enhancement from this warm blob when we do get storms. Why? Because the atmosphere loves warm water. The warmer the water, the more unstable, the more your rain rates come down. So in general, El Nino typically doesn't bring stronger, heavier rain rates, but because of this blob, there is concern that rain rates, because they already have been happening like that, will be heavier than your average El Nino year. So in other words, your average storm in El Nino will be enhanced because of that, especially for coastal areas, and you guys are coastal.
Okay, well, I want to bring in some other people from the governmental agencies that have there's some questions that are going to be aimed in your direction. Do you want me to introduce all of these
Well, we'll
people?
just tell them real quick. So we have U.S. Forest Service here, somebody from the Cleveland National Forest. John Ganaway from OC Parks was here. Animal Care, Sheriff's Division, we met our wonderful Vicki Osborne again earlier. We have OCFA people, Public Works people, and the Water District and Red Cross. So if you've got questions that might be aimed more at those types of agencies, we can try and handle some of those too.
And IRWD, yeah, the Water District.
That's the Water District.
These are direct mud and debris efforts.
Yeah, there's a number of questions about cleaning up the stream, mud and debris, and I think, Vicki, maybe you've got something to say about that. Let me read these questions. And then there's going to be a question for County Public Works. There are a number of palm trees in Silverado Creek. Some are 40 foot tall. Will they be removed and when? Okay, so that's an interesting question. That goes back. The permission that we're getting to clean the stream comes from Fish and Game, I do believe. Let me read a kind of a similar question. Will adequate size cleanup crews have at least one side of the road passable for cars for travel within 1 hour of a mudslide? I guess that's more of a OC Public Works question. So OC Public Works, consider that. Yes. How do we get a neighbor to prepare for this flood? That's a significant problem because the stream is mostly private property. So we can't just go on and take out someone's tree if it's on their property without their permission. Those are significant social problems, really. Don't know that I have an answer for that. When his lack of prepping directly impacts neighbors' properties. Streams are very complicated. So let's take the first one, the number of palm trees in Silverado Creek.
So as you may or may not know, Fish and Wildlife is a very complicated organization to work with. Here's the scope of work, and this is what we have to stick to. The palm trees stay. We are removing the dead alder trees, and we're not removing the stumps or the root balls. We can't touch, dig out anything, any stumps or anything, because if we do, we have to do biological, we have to do a sequifying, because we have to protect the toad. We already waited past September 15th, so the bird nesting's done, so we're good there. But the main purpose is to get rid of all those dead alder trees, which have probably tripled, would you say, in the last 4 years. So that's our goal. And that's what Connie, working with Connie, where'd you go? Working with Connie, that's what our main focus is. That's what we presented. That's why we've been able to do like this 3-week turnaround. So it's very strict that we stick to that scope of work. The palm trees are not dead, correct? Whoever submitted that question? They're just alive and big, correct? Yeah. As long as they're living, they stay. Okay.
They're not native, and a lot of us don't like them. And they're a fire risk.
That's a fight for another day.
Yes. But in terms of stream clearance, so you just heard it from Vicki. So OC Public Works will adequate, so what is the cleanup when we have mudslides, because I'm sure we'll have some this year, what is the cleanup protocol? And again, your name?
AJ.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. My name is AJ Jaime. I'm with OC Public Works. To answer your question, for that is OC Public Works has a wide variety of heavy equipment, staffing available. We have inspectors, we have equipment operators, we have hand crews. Anytime we have a debris flow, and as you guys may have known, we just had a couple in these last storms, August and just recently, maybe a couple weeks ago, and the road was completely blocked off. We were able to get crews out there and completely open the road in one day, and there wasn't a massive amount of debris on Silverado. So to answer your question is, Public Works is always here. We're available to you guys. We have, the canyon itself has an inspector that's assigned not 24/7, but 5 days a week, just specifically for your canyon needs. So if you ever need him or need assistance, his name is Ray Sanchez. He's the gentleman over there in the black. A lot of you may know him already. He's a great asset for your community. If you ever need anything, he's available. He has cards. He's your direct contact. When it comes to just storms in general, we have a hotline number that you can call for any flooding issues that may occur or the roadway or anything you guys want to report. And that number is 714-955-0200. And if you call that number, there'll be somebody there always to answer it. We also have an on-call service for emergency issues. Of course, if it's an emergency, life-threatening, always call 911. But again, we're here for your community. We are always we're always prepared. Let's take Silverado for instance. Last year after the burn area, we went out there with our engineering staff, inspection staff, and we evaluated the entire hillsides. We try to figure out what the best way to protect the roads. I mean, that's our main purpose is public safety, making sure your roadways are free and clear for emergency vehicles, sheriffs, fire. So we're there for you. And then the other thing is we looked at, well, what can we do to protect the public? We went out there, if you guys have driven out there to Silverado, you can kind of take a look and see what we've done. We've installed K-rails along the burn area of the slopes. We've installed silt boards, sandbags, whatever we could to protect the roadway. We also installed rice bales. And as you guys know, we have 3 locations here for Silverado where you guys can pick up sandbags and rice bales for your property. It's up to 50 sandbags and 10 rice bales, and we do have those available. Your contact person, again, is Ray Sanchez, who can arrange to meet you guys there to pick those up. And also, Joanne Hubble is another connection that used to make those services available to your community. So we're here for you. I just want to let you guys know that we're here always for you. We monitor the weather very closely with the Weather Service. We have Dopplers. We have a department, DOC, our Department of Operations Center, along with the EOC. with the sheriff's department. So we monitor the weather really closely. And, you know, we have the entire county, so we also, you know, we know that the canyon is a hot spot for us. So we have staff here available all the time. Thank you.
Okay, we're just gonna, thank you. And they've been tremendous too. I just gotta come back to this question very briefly. How do we get a neighbor to prepare his property for flooding when his lack of prepping directly impacts neighbors' properties? Oh boy, that's hard. I guess if you got an answer to that, let us know, but write it down.
They call the term riparian rights.
Yes.
Riparian rights now.
I don't think we can get into a discussion of this. A related question that came up is, what about cleaning the creek in Majeska? Because the permission that we're pulling does not extend to Majeska. Do you want to make a quick?
I'll make it quick, I promise. We're doing Silverado separate. We're gonna do, and I have to talk to Connie and also Joanne about this, we're gonna try to do another application for Majeska. If we're gonna get that same kind of quick granting, don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Because the burn area, there was an expedite on it, but since we are Southern Cal affected by El Nino, we're trying to pull the El Nino heartstrings. So, no promises, but we're gonna try, okay?
Yeah, I'm gonna just go in the order. Okay, another thing I want to say about that is that the best thing, if you know a neighbor that has a dead tree, if you can let Connie know or let someone about it, we can get help to help get rid of that tree. That's the kind of neighbor-to-neighbor policy that we're trying to get implemented. Because as a bureaucratic exercise, it may be impossible to have someone come on private property and take their tree. Just can't do that without their permission. So getting them lined up and seeing the need for it is critical. Okay, now, are the storms more rain at once, or we already answered that one? What is NOAA's accuracy in predictions?
All right, who's the wise person back there? How do you expect me to answer it? 100%.
35%.
Huh?
Weathermen are like 35%. They take big bucks. You sounded like you know what you're talking about.
I do know what I'm talking about. Accuracy, gosh, there's so many variables. I mean, I think what you're talking about is maybe rainfall. You probably don't care about the temperature as much, or humidity, or you might care about wind speed. With Santa Ana's, we're very accurate. It's very rare we miss one, probably 80–90%, even the magnitude. We may not get every canyon exactly right, because every canyon responds a little differently. With rainfall, yeah, rainfall's a little trickier, but it's over 50%. Let's see if Vicky's nodding her head. Because Vicky uses the information directly in terms of, she wants raw numbers. Tell me how much rain's gonna fall at this particular, same location every time, so you can develop consistency. And she looks at those numbers. They're pretty good. We verify them all the time. They're definitely better than 35%, but our biggest challenge, yeah, is not just rainfall, but timing of the rainfall, because that can make a world of difference if it comes all at once. If I tell you I forecast an inch of rain for Silverado and it's spread out over 8 hours, I'm like, okay, but if it all comes in 3 hours, ooh. So there's a lot of room for improvement there. Most of that is our high-resolution computer models that we use to make those predictions. When it comes down to the whites of its eyes, we're using radar estimates, which are very accurate, even in the canyon. There are some places where there's blind spots, just like with your cell phone coverage, but that's why we need ground truth in rain gauges. But very accurate, where we can measure rainfall per hour, within a few hundredths of an inch, when it's actually coming in, like off the ocean. So, but that's a good question.
It's a great question. To defend Alex, part of our challenges is we share regional media with LA.
You'll have to use a microphone. Sorry.
I talk loud.
But not loud enough.
To defend Alex, we use regional media, so we share media with LA. And LA Oxnard provides LA and those areas. So sometimes we hear what LA is saying, or what we're hearing on the news, and sometimes I think LA is kind of overbears kind of what happens, what's here. So it's kind of a challenge, but they are very good at giving us spot forecasts. So we are communicating with them all the time to try to get accurate numbers, and they do give us that. So when we say it's going to rain, actually it's been very good the last couple storms. When they've said it's going to rain probably about a ½ inch per hour, we did either hit that or exceed that. So it's been pretty accurate the last couple storms. Probably since Alex been there.
Okay, this is a question. Is there a central drop-off area for felled trees? I'm guessing we're meaning after a storm, there's a bunch of trees down. And for mud cleanup, I guess those are two public works kinds of questions. I'll just say my own experience in the mudslide is that we had about 1,000 cubic yards of mud and debris on our street. So we're pretty familiar with that.
Where'd it go?
Well, very interesting. It's a private street, and the county offered to haul it away for us, but they would not do the tractor loading, so we had to get our own tractors lined up. Which reminds me, I do have a list of tractor owners and operators in both Silverado and Majeska, so I'm going to be contacting them to find out what their availability is, and we're going to see if we can get some coordination around that. I just know on my own street at one time we had 6 to 8 tractors operating continuously, and it seemed like for weeks it was that much mud. So what is the plan for getting rid of the mud and felled trees? That's for Public Works. And I assume we're meaning after an event.
Well, that gets a little tricky. As you know, Public Works, we're allowed to do work just on public right-of-way. So private property, you're pretty much on your own as far as getting rid of the trees. But anything on the roadways, within our road right-of-way, we're more than happy to get rid of it. We also are offering 2 locations where we have trash bins. One will be at Black Star, at the corner of Black Star and Silverado, and another one will be at Majeska site. And those are just strictly for if you have some burned debris or so. Just, it's not to jump your old couches is basically what I'm trying to tell you. But if you have some materials, some debris that probably would have made it into the storm drain or the street, for right now, we're offering that service available to your community. So again, at Majeska and at Silverado, we have 2 trash bins. Also, there is the creek cleanup that's going to be taking place that Connie talked about.
Is the creek considered the storm drain? Specifically Silverado Canyon, because that's the only drain.
No.
No, it doesn't matter for Silverado Canyon.
Write down your questions.
Yeah.
Is there any help in Silverado Canyon, the creek?
Here. If you would write down your questions, that we got a lot of questions here. It's a good question. We want to answer it. Janet has something to say.
So Inter-Canyon League is not mighty compared to all these agencies, but the reason the Inter-Canyon League was founded in 1969 was to help our neighbors after wildfire and mud. And so some of you who were here in 2010 probably recall that Wendy Hayter and Linda May and Connie and lots of other people do get together, and we do, Paula Labar, and we do set up teams. We get everybody from the Mormons and the Hindus and the Christian churches and the Boy Scouts to come out and help us. So nobody's going to be left, well, I shouldn't say high and dry. It is a neighbor-to-neighbor, very canyon-driven response as well, in terms of shoveling that mud and those trees out. And then, as the Public Works gentleman said, if you can get it to the public roadway, they'll pick it up. So we're working, or that's the way it's worked in the past. Anyway, okay.
Okay, well, we have it on good authority. The next question. You do have something quick.
I understand Dan Dulac's trying to get his permits in position so we can take things to him.
Over at the, yes.
Trees, brush.
Brush, yes, green waste. Okay, This is sort of a specific question. When will Maple Springs hike area be open? At the end of Silverado Canyon? Yes? Hey, we got someone with an answer. And introduce yourself.
Hi there, good evening. I'm Daryl Vance. I'm the district ranger up here in the Forest Service. We renewed the closure for another year based upon what the El Nino predictions are showing us. As you're all aware, we got really not that much rain, so we didn't get much regrowth up there. And so it essentially stopped the clock for the regeneration of the area. Plus, you know, we don't want to put public safety at risk, so we've got it closed. Once we get potentially through the rainy season, we'll be looking at it again. We're going to get a couple more gates on the top end. Hopefully we'll be making the closure a little bit smaller on the top end, but definitely at the bottom, Maple Springs will stay closed for the year.
Okay. Very good. What has the county public works done, if anything, to prevent a repeat of the debris flow from the canyons at 17286 Majeska? I'm not sure of that exact address.
Maybe the mouth of Majestic.
Are you prepared to answer that?
The mouth of Majestic.
Oh, we're talking about the mouth of Majeska, sometimes known as Majeska Lake.
No, it's the canyon 1/2 mile in.
Oh, 1/2 mile in. Is this your question, Chris?
1,000 cubic yards of debris on 6 of my neighbors and me.
Okay.
And that's never been cleaned up.
Okay, so.
Is that on private property?
It's private property, and I've complained because it's an illegal dump of 10,000 cubic yards of debris, and the county attorney has all the information, and I've complained to
Okay,
you
that
guys.
sounds like a complicated issue. Ray Sanchez, again, is your contact person. We'll definitely look into it, and we'll take care of it. Again, anything that's on public right-of-way, we will clean it up, and that's from normal storm events. The lake in the middle of the road, I think you're talking about on Majeska, that's happened this last couple of rainstorms. Yes, we
It
would.
only started when you guys put in the drain pipe.
That was a public works project. We put a new storm drain in there, and it looks like the drain, it has a flat grate on there, which gets plugged up with debris. I actually have that currently working with our engineering. We're going to remodify that drain and raise it so it has kind of like they call it a bird cage, so the debris can actually flow in there and we won't have that lake issue. And we're working on that to try to get that accomplished before El Nino. So we are working on that one, yes.
All right. Will the county help with mud on personal property in backyards and private roads? I think we already answered that. The answer is no. Help bulldoze mud in backyards or stabilize slopes. The answer is the county will not help you. We're trying to get a list of local tractor operators who can help you, and we'll be publishing that out. Will adequate sized cleanup crews have at least one side of the road passable for cars for travel through within 1 hour of a mudslide? I don't know if you can promise that, but we already talked about that. Okay. What specifically are we allowed to take out of our private property creek beds? And please be specific.
When we get the actual permit or notification letter from Fish and Game, I trust you, there will be a list of demands attached, very specific on the scope of work. What we submitted scope of work of what we said that we needed to do was for the Silverado Creek, remove the mud dams that came into the creek. So they gave us permission as long as we don't tamper with the banks, we stay in the middle area, we don't dig out, or we don't do extra grading type projects in there. We are not allowed to take heavy equipment in the creek. Everything has to be done by hand crews. In regards to cutting down, chopping, we leave the stumps of the dead alder trees. Anything dead, any tree that's dead, the tree's dead, you think it's dead, you take it out, we're okay. Okay? Connie will be having meetings, all you people that signed up to volunteer, so we can go over the permit, and we will have a planning meeting so we can go over what you can and cannot do. We want to make sure no one gets in trouble. No one needs to get a fine. We're happy we're able to push this forward. In regards to some of those trees that are very tall, close to some of the overhead lines, we're trying to get some people that have wisdom and knowledge on how to use chainsaws well, because we don't just want anyone who doesn't know how to use a chainsaw but wants to help not get electrocuted. So we are looking at some of those things again. County Public Works has been fantastic trying to make sure a lot of preparations in place. If they could, they would. They'd come in, they'd jump in, they'd help, but we just can't on the private property issue. So we're trying to work with some other different groups and organizations, so, okay?
All right, another softball question for El Nino, is it gonna last till 2016?
No, that's an easy one. It's not expected to, but, and it's not typical for it, but what we have seen in strong El Ninos is that the effect actually continues into the summer, which would actually mean good, because it'd be a cooler summer and maybe a little bit wet type of summer. It's very rare for it to continue into the next year. We have seen it continue into the fall of the following year and then just completely fall apart. One other thing I should note is that as far as accuracy, I was thinking about your question because it's an excellent question. When we issue flash flood warnings, which activate the emergency alert system or your phone, your wireless emergency alert system like on your iPhone, we're meeting and exceeding thresholds, and those thresholds have been coordinated with U.S. Forest Service, USGS, the county, the Public Works, the flood control, and so forth, and they're calibrated on our radar and other equipment. That is something, a flash flood warning is something, that's when you really want to drop what you're doing and figure out, because there's a lot of uncertainty once you reach those thresholds, what is moving, where it's moving, and how fast it's moving. And it may be just a moment's notice type of thing, whites of its eyes. So flash flood warnings, you definitely want to be in tune when those are issued for your canyon.
Okay, do we still have webcam cameras in the creek? Majeska Bridge, there used to be one. I guess this is monitoring the flow rates in the creeks.
Yeah, Bob Scheibel's out of town. He's with the fire.
I guess we don't have the answer to that.
I believe he does.
Okay.
Is that a private camera? Or
there is a private camera. There's also a weather station at the corner of Majeska and Markison Road that is maintained, I believe, by Cal State people.
Irvine?
No, not Irvine. Fullerton, excuse me. Okay, is our soil still hydrophobic? We have a nod, yes? Yes? Okay.
I can kind of answer that. It was rendered hydrophobic when it underwent some metamorphosis during the fire. So the burned area soils are reasonably still considered hydrophobic.
Even from the 2010 or 7?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Okay. Just in Silverado, yes. The answer is yes in Silverado. Another Public Works question. If we move the mud to the road, will the Public Works pick it up? I mean, if like in the morning they come and there's another 1,000 cubic yards of dirt, would you?
like snowplows, right?
Like snowplows. That's an important question.
I'm going to answer the other one first. The one about the cameras. We are actually, the Public Works is looking into installing cameras at hotspots throughout the county. We have more hotspots other than the canyon, but we're looking at possibly a few locations here in the canyon. One is at Silverado, the burn area, to monitor any debris flows that might happen, and also the creeks, anything that we think is a potential of a public hazard. So we are looking into that. We are putting our first one in Santa Ana River to see how that goes. Here in the canyon, we may have a little more difficulties because, as you guys know, the reception out here is very difficult. So once we work out the kinks, we will be putting in some cameras to help us and some extra eyes to monitor your guys' community.
Would you put a link on it so that we could access it also?
We will work on that, and if it's available and we're able to do something like that, once we get up through the privacy issues, yes, of course we would. Now, the other question about pushing debris out, I don't recommend that. Again, we are here to help you guys out any way we can, but we have to be realistic about it too. Because let's just say it's a little bit of mud somebody's pushing out. minor details, we'll pick it up if it's part of our, we have a debris flow pretty close. But when you have somebody who might be pushing a lot of material or stuff out in the roadway, that's a problem, and we don't want to get into that area. Again, we're here to help you guys the best we can. We're here for you, but just, use good judgment. Thank you.
Well, I've got to the end of these written questions. Did you have a question?
I can't write, so I'm gonna just ask if there's an old dam that was built in Helena Majeska's time up above Harding and Wilkinson in Majeska, and it was saturated. It was a big burn area in the 2007 fire. So I'm wondering, you reminded me with the hydrophobic question, has anybody looked at that since we're off the charts on all these weather patterns? The last few years, like 100-year storm is basically a 10-year storm now, it seems like. In terms of risk of failure of that dam, there's some folks who live right below that dam, sitting in this room actually. So just wondering if there's any kind of periodic checks or anything on features like that. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. It's a good place to live. It's the best by a dam site.
I'm not necessarily familiar with that dam in particular. We're actually working in conjunction with county to do some removal of some of these dams that are in some of the creeks. But these are probably not the same thing. I mean, these are rock and mortar. Is this the same sort of thing, or? It's an earthen dam. Oh, it's earthen. Okay, so it's not the same thing.
No, it's concrete cement.
Okay, so they might be one of the ones that we're talking about. Is it probably about 1970s or earlier?
You're talking about like the lower one, but
It's
they've got holes in the
1870s.
canyon, that's like a 30-foot.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, that wouldn't be one of those.
It's more than a century old.
Okay, yeah.
Can you add
Not
it
familiar
to
with
the
it. Is it on Forest Service land? It's probably not, right?
It starts in the forest and goes private.
Okay, we'll have to look at it.
Okay.
An IRWD question. Ah, they built the dam, right?
No, Majeska.
Oh, Majeska built it. Oh, Madam Majeska. Well, she's obviously liable. Okay.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Tom Roberts with the Irvine Ranch Water District. So Majeska Dam is, our Harding Dam has actually been filled in since 1969. So there's not really a big risk of failure there. It's not like it's a water body behind a regular dam, so.
Okay. Well, I don't have any more cards. I'm not inclined to take hand waves. It's, our officials are gonna stay here for a few minutes. It's 8:30, which is when we usually call our meetings to a halt. So our meeting's over. Did you have something, reminder? Okay, I want another thank you for Joanne for putting this on. I think we owe a round of applause to Bruce for hosting it at the fire station. And for Alex for a great presentation. It's quite interesting. Yeah, okay. Oh yes, we need some help with the chairs. There's several hundred chairs here, so appreciate your help. Thanks for coming. And, oh yes, you're closing. No, we don't. Oh yeah, well I move that we close the meeting. All in favor? Aye. Okay, it's passed unanimously. See how easy it is?